Welcome back to Wash Talk, the Carwash Podcast. I'm your host, Rich DiPaolo, and today joining me, we welcome Harry Caruso, founder and CEO of Carwash Advisory. Harry, welcome back to Wash Talk.
Thanks, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, great. So, Harry, as you know, we tend to begin our podcast episodes with what we call the Wash Talk Basic Package question. It helps us and our audience get to know you a little bit better. It also gives us an excuse to put you on the spot, Harry.
Fantastic.
So our basic package question for you today is, we're curious, did you have a mentor or someone in your life or career who kind of helped you out along the way? Hey, Car Wash fans. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button below and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate you supporting our channel. And now, back to our interview with Harry Caruso.
No, but the only person that's ever mattered is my mother.
Okay.
Not a mentor, but a hell of an example.
All right. Well, that's a great example to have. So, Harry, today's topic, I wanted to catch up with you a little bit on some of the financing options that we have here in the car wash market that operators have at their disposal. And what better place than to talk about those options, right? So if I'm a car wash operator and I'm looking to either renovate or maybe even acquire another car wash, what financing options are available for me these days?
Yeah, so Rich, this gets asked more and more, and even more so than ever before, specifically because of interest rates and all of the talk, buzz, and actual change surrounding such. Essentially, you have multiple options as an individual owner-operator, either looking to acquire or expand. The first is what we all hear about and we dread on a surface level, which is the SBA loan, as it appears. The other would be that of conventional financing. Essentially, Rich, what I would say about financing, and if anybody ever has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them directly about specific instances, but my whole rule of thumb is if you're doing something that should be backed, you can get the money to do it. And that's what it really comes down to. The bank, the lender, and equity investor, they're all looking to make their return and get their money back. So if you're doing something tried and true in terms of intent and rationale, you should have no problem. One point though, Rich, I would want to say that nobody does, and it's the weirdest, most peculiar thing is, if you are buying a wash from anybody, for goodness sakes, if it has a debt facility on it or a mortgage, go to that lender first because they know the property, they're already comfortable with it. So don't be afraid to ever ask a seller or current owner about their debt capital structure or their lender.
Okay. Now, what about the size of the loan or the size of the operator? If I'm a small operator, am I a little bit more restricted in my financing options than, let's say, a larger car wash company? What are the differences there?
Yeah, so Rich, this is also a really good question because we as a company deal with everything from a single site operator to 30, 40, 50 car wash packages. What is available to one is not available to the other. So it's a very, very important question. And there is what I like to call the valley of death. And it shouldn't exist, but it does exist. But really it is reverse parabolic, if you will. So on one side you have all of these small financing options, which consists of the SBA, the conventional, so on. It's hard money in certain instances even, asset-based lending. On the other side, when you get big enough, any large lender will lend to you, right? And that was like Mr. with Leonard Green on the equity side. People were chomping at the bit to be on the debt side of that capital structure because you have a parent guarantee, so on and so forth. So the tiny side is very easy. The very large side is very easy. And somewhere in between it becomes a bit more difficult. And this is that valley of death. Now, the truth is it's not a valley of death, but the reason I call it that is there's very little coverage of it, but you end up dealing with what is known as mezzanine lenders, less than traditional financing, and oftentimes there will inevitably be somewhat of an equity component in the debt.
And that valley is getting larger and larger as these years go along, right? Where we're seeing the industry on the operator level is top heavy, fewer smaller chains as these years go along. But yeah, in that 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 location operators, that valley is definitely getting a lot bigger. But so once I've secured my financing, now I'm ready to build a car wash, right? So I know a lot of factors are in play. Land's going to differ, depending on the location you're looking to build on. On average, though, Harry, what are you seeing? How much does it cost to build a new car wash nowadays? And can you let us know how that compares to recent years, let's even say 5 to 10 years ago?
Yeah, so this is and Rich, I'm glad you asked it, and I'm not opposed to it, but it is in many ways a loaded question because there's two variables that are extremely difficult to make homogeneous across the board or to make assumptions on that are of any reasonable value. That being said, and those two, right, are the land value and then the sort of capital structure that individuals buying it with. Believe it or not, as you can imagine, when you're spending your money versus somebody else's money, you may spend it differently.
For sure.
Right? And then needless to say, a piece of prime real estate in Miami or in a metropolitan area costs a different amount than maybe in rural Iowa. So that being said, and I was actually baffled by this, and I hate to not give my own answer, but NCS actually bumped up their average cost per build on a tunnel wash to either 5.6 or 6.2. Wow. And that does represent the cost that we're seeing today.
Okay.
The biggest things that have changed is that used to, and I was not an operator building a ton at the time, but it used to be $3.5 million.
And are you including the land in that? Yeah.
That's inclusive of land. Now, again, right, you could make an argument for, and this is one of the most fascinating sort of debated, contentious topics in the entire industry, is it reasonable, prudent, or smart to be paying $5 million for a single plot of land to build a car wash? Different question, but that obviously moves the variable.
Yeah. And I perfectly lead into my next question here. I was interested, could you tell us about any innovative financing strategies such as sale-leaseback, right? We kind of alluding to that in the previous response, that an operator might be able to leverage outside of traditional lending?
Yeah, so the sale-leaseback market is the most fascinating thing that's ever happened to this industry in my eyes. The genesis of it was not the current use of it today, which is most fascinating, and then the proliferation where it doesn't actually have a long existing place in the industry is mind-boggling. So as you alluded to, sale-leasebacks, although oftentimes, not naively, but on the most surface level, they're referred to as, I'm going to shut off the land and just maybe, cash out a bit. Call it what you may, but it is synthetic leverage, right? And it was originally designed to force basically public markets to value a car wash company off that of a cash flow multiple rather than a balance sheet basis, which is smart. And we saw that in the spec lending industry not long before now. And it worked, go figure. But the industry caught wind, and then with COVID being a tailwind and then the defensive nature of the industry being highlighted being another tailwind, all of a sudden everybody's doing sale-leasebacks. That would be designated as the most common non-traditional financing route somebody could take. And what I will say about them is they are a double-edged sword.
Okay.
But just as with anything else that's more complicated, it's that much more important to know what you're doing.
Okay, so you recommend it under the right circumstances, it sounds like, right? Just know what you're getting yourself into. All right, great. So Harry, you've been at this for a while. I'm sure you speak with a lot of operators who have financing questions. Can you share with our audience some of the most common financing questions you hear, and then your responses to these questions?
Yeah, so I think that there are two questions that come up constantly, Rich, and they're really good ones. And one of them is probably the first and foremost thing that comes to mind, right, is, well, what are they going to take claims on, right? So I'm going to put down this amount of equity. I'm going to put up this amount of money. I already own the land. Fine. How much can I get? Sure, that's right. But the other question is, and this, largely stems from this debatably irrational fear of SBA and government-based loan programs, but are they going to put a claim on everything? Are they going to put a blanket lien on my house, my car, right? And the answer is it depends on the debt facility. And many of them, yes. Many of them, no. But again, it's something that you have to make sure you're cognizant of before you enter into any sort of mortgage or financing arrangement. That's what I would say is the number one most frequented question. The number one most recently frequented question is what's going on with interest rates and how that's going to impact the industry.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I had one final question for you to wrap up this podcast here, and how have the changes in interest rates? It seems like they're coming fast and furious, right? So how have the changes in increases in the interest rates over this past year or so, how have they affected financing in the car wash market?
Yeah, so Rich, I have relatively, or actually not relatively, I have quite strong opinions on this, and I think that there's a lot of mishigosh, enigmatic BS talk around it that's just non-directional or non-consequential. The truth of the matter is interest rates are rising. They will continue to rise. I don't care what anybody else says. And the bottom line is this. The car wash industry, long-term, mid-term, maybe not immediate term, meaning we could roll into the next year before we see this come to fruition, will be the beneficiary of a rising interest rate environment, all else equal.
Okay. Anything else to add about financing in the car wash market that you want to leave our audience with today?
I think, inside the car wash market, outside the car wash market, as long as you should be doing it, as long as you would want to be on the other side of it, meaning you would want to be the lender, it's a really good opportunity, do it. There will be a way to find financing. You just have to know where to look.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you for your time today, Harry. We appreciate you being a guest on Wash Talk. Our guest today has been Harry Caruso of Carwash Advisory. To learn more about his company, please visit carwashadvisory.com.